The afternoon sunlight slipped through the sheer curtains in the living room, casting soft shadows across the wooden floor my mother had personally chosen when she gifted us this house for our wedding. I'd always loved this time of day, when the three-story Victorian home seemed to glow from within, every carefully chosen detail reflecting the love and sacrifice that built this place. But today, that familiar warmth felt hollow as I watched my husband Ethan pace anxiously in front of the fireplace, his usual confidence now replaced by something that looked a lot like guilt. We had been married for 3 years, together for 5, and I believed completely that we were building something solid and good. Ethan worked as a project manager for a construction company, while I had built a successful career as a senior credit officer at First National Bank. Our life was comfortable, stable, and quietly fulfilling, shaped by shared goals and mutual respect. At least, that's what I thought until this moment. "Sarah, we need to talk," Ethan said, stopping his pacing and facing me directly. The seriousness in his tone made me shiver immediately. This wasn't my husband talking about weekend plans or a vacation. This was the voice of someone preparing to deliver bad news. I set down the teacup in my hand and looked at him expectantly, even though every instinct in me warned that I didn't want to hear what he was about to say. "I've done something terrible," he began, unable to meet my eyes. "Something that will change everything between us." The words seemed to echo in the space between us, growing louder and more threatening by the second. I felt my heart start to race, even though my voice stayed calm when I finally spoke. "What is it, Ethan?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of buying time when facing difficult conversations. "I'm seeing someone else. It's been about 6 months. And she's pregnant." The words hit me like a hard blow, yet somehow I remained seated, holding myself together. Pregnant. 6 months. While I had been planning our wedding anniversary dinner and looking for a fertility specialist because we had been trying unsuccessfully to have a child of our own, my husband had been building a family with someone else. "Who is she?" I asked, surprised by the calmness of my own voice. "Her name is Jessica. I met her by chance at a business conference. Sarah, I never intended for this to happen. It just happened gradually, and by the time I realized it had become serious." "You mean by the time you realized you were having unprotected sex with another woman?" The bluntness of my response seemed to catch him off guard. Maybe he had expected tears, hysteria, desperate pleas to fix things. Instead, he was faced with his wife's disturbingly calm analysis of his betrayal. "It's not that simple," he said weakly. "It's actually very simple. Over the past 6 months, you made a series of choices that led to this moment. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" What followed was a week of tense conversations, sleeping in separate rooms, and the slow realization that our marriage was, in fact, over. Ethan said he was torn between his obligation to me and his feelings for Jessica, but his actions made his true priorities clear. He spent every night at her apartment, supposedly figuring things out together, while I stayed home, surrounded by the remnants of a life I had once believed was safe. My phone vibrated lightly in my palm. 3 messages in a row, all from the same sender. Marcus. I was used to him reaching out only when it was absolutely necessary. "Need to see you now." The last message had been sent less than 5 minutes earlier, off the official record. "Can you meet at the cafe on 47th Street? Marcus had never suggested meeting outside the office. During the entire week, I had hired him to follow Ethan. Every update had been sent via encrypted email, concise, punctual, emotionless. The fact that he was asking to meet in person could only mean one thing. What he was about to show me should not exist on any system. I don't remember how I left the house, only that my hands were steady on the steering wheel, while my mind kept replaying the image of Ethan standing in front of me, head bowed, eyes averted, admitting he was seeing someone else. Marcus was already seated in a corner of the cafe, hunched slightly over his open laptop, looking less polished than in the rare times I'd met him before. His shirt was faintly wrinkled at the cuffs, his coffee long gone cold. When I sat down across from him, he looked up, and in that single second, I knew this had gone far beyond a routine infidelity investigation. He turned the screen toward me. On it was a dense timeline, dates marked in red. Ethan's movements over the past 3 months, overlaid with my own work schedule. Emergency meetings, site inspections, dinners with partners. Every single one lined up perfectly with the days I was away for conferences, branch audits, or business trips. Not a coincidence, Marcus said quietly. I checked parking garage cameras, card statements, hotel bookings. Every time you left the city, he was gone from the house within 2 hours. He clicked into another folder. Long-distance photos, sharp enough not to need zooming in. Ethan entering an apartment building, his hand resting lightly on the small of a woman's back. Jessica. I recognized her instantly, even with only half her face visible. Some nights they stayed there until late. Some mornings Ethan left before 7, returning to my house as if nothing had happened. And this, Marcus continued, his voice even, like he was reading a report. Spending. Receipts filled the screen. Restaurants, hotels, gifts. Amounts not large enough to raise immediate alarms, but steady enough to form a parallel life. I recognized a few familiar names, places Ethan had said he went to with coworkers or clients. The timing matched, cruelly precise, with the nights I spent alone, believing my husband was working for our shared future. There's more, Marcus said, his tone calm but firm. From that same period, his company started receiving high-value construction contracts from a major real estate group, the same group where Jessica is the director of project development. I stared at the screen, the evidence of my life unraveling neatly arranged into calendar blocks and expense statements. Why are you showing me all this? I asked. You're taking a huge risk. Marcus closed the laptop and looked straight at me. Because you're the only client who pays on time and never treats me like I'm disposable. And because what they're doing isn't just wrong. It could be contract fraud, conflict of interest. You deserve to know the truth. My phone rang before I could respond. Ethan's mother's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring, but she called again immediately. I took a deep breath, motioned an apology to Marcus, and answered. Her voice was bright, artificially so, as if we were still a normal family. She asked if I was coming over for Sunday dinner, said she needed to know early to prepare. Then she asked if I was traveling this weekend, whether I had some Miami trip coming up. I froze. The Miami trip was 2 weeks away, and I hadn't told anyone outside my work team. Ethan must have mentioned it, she laughed lightly, then quickly shifted to asking if I'd be working late tomorrow, saying she planned to come into the city and thought we might have lunch together. 3 calls in 1 week, all revolving around my schedule. A woman who used to contact me only on holidays was suddenly interested in every hour I left, every day I returned. I ended the call with a vague promise and looked up to meet Marcus's watchful gaze. She's tracking my schedule, I said slowly, almost to myself. Marcus reopened his laptop. I think you should see this. He accessed another database, the entry logs of the building where Jessica lived. My mother-in-law's name appeared 4 times in the past month. 4 times. 4 officially recorded visits, not counting any that didn't require registration. No one had told me. Not my husband, not the other woman, and certainly not his family. The pieces kept snapping together in my head. The charity gala I missed because of a last-minute audit. The photos on the company intranet, Ethan standing beside Jessica in a tailored suit, his hand behind her back, as if by habit. The caption thanking family and close partners. I had scrolled past it that day without stopping. Then the wedding a few weeks earlier. I had stepped out onto the balcony to catch my breath when James, my brother-in-law, wandered over. Drunk, unsteady, and speaking with just enough slurred honesty to let something slip. You're too good for all this. When I asked what he meant, he glanced around and whispered, Everyone knows. They're handling it. Helen appeared just in time, pulling James away before he could say more. "Wedding emotions," she said with an awkward smile. James's drunken words stayed with me the entire drive home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, James's drunken words blending with Marcus's schedules and my mother-in-law's probing calls about my whereabouts. The pattern was clear, but I needed something more solid. Not just to confirm it to myself, but to confront it in any courtroom or boardroom this might lead to. I reopened my old contact list and scrolled to a name a friend had sent me years ago after discovering her husband had siphoned off joint funds. Linda Garrison, independent financial specialist. Discreet investigations, no unnecessary questions. Linda answered on the second ring, her voice low, clipped, unsurprised when I said I needed to meet. "Bring everything you have," she said, "and be prepared to see more than you expect." Linda's office was in an unmarked building, wedged between a shoe repair shop and a dental clinic. No glass walls, no receptionist, just a wooden door and the heavy smell of coffee. Linda was in her 50s, wearing jeans and a gray sweater, hair tied back, the kind of woman you could easily overlook in a crowd. She slid a hot cup of coffee toward me and opened a worn yellow notebook. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her. No emotion, no speculation, just facts. The business trips, the nights Ethan didn't come home, Jessica, the contracts, the way my husband confessed, and we're trying to work it out, along with my in-laws' recent strange behavior. Linda didn't interrupt, only nodded occasionally, her pen moving steadily, as if she'd seen this pattern hundreds of times before. "You said Ethan works in construction, right?" she asked when I stopped. I nodded. "Then we start with the contracts," she said, turning her computer screen toward me. "Not the affair. The affair is just the door. Money is the room behind it." Over the next 3 days, I lived 2 parallel lives. By day, I went to work, spoke with clients, signed credit files, smiled on cue. By night, I sat in Linda's office or in front of my laptop at home, watching numbers surface like fingerprints that couldn't be erased. Ethan remained absent, still claiming he was dealing with things. Jessica showed up everywhere. Not by name, but through careful reroutes. Contracts that should have gone to long-standing partners were suddenly redirected to Ethan's company. Multi-million-dollar investment opportunities, labeled strategic proposals, potential partnerships, appeared right as Jessica began seeing him. Linda walked me through each timestamp, each email sent at midnight, each internal memo with digital signatures. "Here," she said, pointing to the screen. "November. The first contract. $3 million. And this is the same week Ethan told you he had to rush out for a site inspection." I recognized familiar names. Dinners Ethan had said were client meetings. Trips he'd framed as career opportunities. All of it laid out neatly in front of me, cold, emotionless. "She's not just sleeping with your husband," Linda said, her tone as flat as a weather report. "She's investing in him." And that investment was paying off. Thanks to the new stream of contracts, Ethan's company had suddenly been placed on a shortlist for a higher position within the group. A promotion. Power. More money. Linda zoomed in on an email. I saw Jessica's name in the sender field. The message brief. "Ethan is the right choice for the next phase." I didn't gasp. I just felt a chill spread from my chest down my arms. "You see?" Linda said, closing the laptop. "This isn't love. This is a transaction." I asked her whether all of this would hold up under scrutiny. Linda looked at me, her gaze sharp and clear. "Not only will it hold," she said, "it's obvious. Diverting contracts for personal gain is one of the easiest patterns to spot." And she wasn't careful. The final pieces found me without effort. I remembered the party where Ethan came home late, a strange perfume clinging to his shirt. The way he talked about work with a new, almost feverish excitement. The looks from his family when they heard his company was taking off. All of it now lined up, no longer scattered. Linda printed out a thick stack of documents and placed it in front of me. "You don't need to read it all tonight," she said. "Just know that everything is here. The actions, the motive, the benefit." That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Ethan wasn't back yet. I walked slowly through the living room, up the stairs, my hand brushing the familiar wooden banister. The house was the same, the lights still warm, but I no longer saw it through the eyes of a trusting wife. I was the one holding the map. I sat alone at the dining table, opened Linda's file, and turned the pages one by one. Not to hurt, but to remember. Because by then, I understood one thing very clearly. I was no longer in a story about a broken marriage. I was standing in the middle of a power exchange disguised as betrayal, and I had everything I needed to decide which direction the next step would take. They had traded my marriage for money. The documents taking shape in front of me left no room for gray areas. These pages would either destroy them or they would destroy me. There was no middle ground anymore. That evening, I cooked dinner as if nothing had changed. The familiar dishes, the familiar smell of spices, the table set properly as it was every day. Ethan sat across from me, cutting his steak with precise, even movements, exactly the way he did everything else in his life. Neat, controlled, nothing extra. He had no idea that my phone was recording, placed face down beneath a neatly folded napkin on the table. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice hollow, just like what remained of this marriage. "Busy," I replied. "Quarterly reports are coming due." I watched him nod absently, his eyes still fixed on his phone screen. I mentioned that his mother had called again today, asking very detailed questions about my schedule. His finger paused for exactly 1 second before continuing to scroll. "She's probably planning for the weekend," he said without looking up. "You know, family tradition." Family. I almost laughed at the irony, but lowered my head to hide it. Over the next 3 days, I became a version of myself I never thought could exist. Every night after Ethan fell asleep, I went into the spare living room, turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the desk lamp on. I photographed every receipt, every email, every statement under my phone's light, saving them to encrypted drives. I carried USB sticks sealed in plastic sleeves to Marie's apartment, my friend from college. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just made hot tea, opened the door, stored them in the deepest drawer, and said she would keep them safe. Lunches with my mother-in-law became intelligence-gathering sessions. I arrived early, my phone resting quietly in my coat pocket, recording every seemingly harmless word. She talked about Ethan's promising new clients, about how generous Jessica was with contract introductions. "A very smart woman," Helen said as she lifted an expensive glass of wine. "She understands the value of strategic relationships. Not everyone has that kind of vision." "Strategic relationships," I repeated, my knife striking the plate sharply as I cut the beef. "Is that what we're calling it?" Her hand froze midair. "I don't understand what you mean, Sarah." "Nothing," I smiled. "Just thinking about work." Careers matter, but they shouldn't be everything. Sometimes we have to accept that people grow in different directions. Ethan, for example, has been exploring new horizons lately. It's healthy for a marriage when both people have space to explore their options. Explore options. I kept my voice carefully neutral. "What do you mean?" "Oh, career growth, new connections. Jessica is wonderful for Ethan's advancement. You should be proud he's expanding his network." I recorded everything, every knowing glance, every coded sentence, every moment she believed she was being clever, while I played the role of the wife waiting for her husband to realize his mistake and come home. The turning point came with new evidence, and it was there that Jessica's arrogance revealed itself. The designer dress worn at a charity gala, logged as client relationship building, a weekend at a 5-star hotel, partner care, high-end jewelry, strategic gifts, a private flight, site inspection. On every receipt were 2 signatures, Jessica and Ethan. He paid for everything with company money. The trail was so blatant it was almost a challenge. They weren't just having an affair. They were entering that affair into the company books. But the most disturbing part was the timeline. 6 months of deception laid out hour by hour, meal by meal, lie by lie. Every time Ethan kissed me goodbye while planning to meet Jessica. Every family gathering where they discussed my schedule to create opportunities for their meetings. Every moment they smiled at me while counting the money flowing from Jessica's company into their pockets. When the sun rose, I looked at the man still sleeping peacefully in bed, his face calm in the morning light. He didn't know that I had built a case that would destroy everything he had. The woman he married, who once trusted blindly and loved completely, was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that love without respect is worthless, and that the best revenge is not emotional. It is procedural, systematic, and absolutely ruthless. I closed the laptop and stared at the comprehensive report I had assembled. My husband slept on beside me as the morning sun painted the bedroom walls gold. The evidence was complete, undeniable, and devastating. Now I had to decide how to deploy it. That weekend, Ethan announced that his family wanted to meet, to discuss how we're going to handle things from here on out, he explained, avoiding my eyes. The wording alone should have warned me about what was coming. On the Friday before the gathering, I went to see my lawyer to make sure all my personal finances were protected. I opened a new bank account in my own name, moved my retirement funds, and documented the current value of all our joint marital assets. If Ethan wanted a divorce after what was about to happen, I would be ready. On Sunday afternoon the following week, 6 people gathered in my living room. Ethan, his parents Helen and Robert Patterson, his sister Grace and her husband Mark, and Jessica, heavily pregnant in her final months and glowing with the confidence of someone who believed she had won a prize worth fighting for. They sat on the furniture my mother had helped me choose, in the room where we had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and quiet Sunday dinners, and looked at me with expressions ranging from condescending pity to open hostility. Helen, who had always held the role of family anchor with iron determination, spoke first. Her voice carried the tone of someone delivering a final, non-negotiable decision. "Sarah, dear, we need to discuss the practical aspects of this situation. What's done is done, and all of us need to move forward in the best way possible for everyone involved, especially the baby." I noticed immediately that her concern was focused entirely on Jessica's pregnancy, not on the marriage being dismantled or the daughter-in-law who had been part of their family for years. "Jessica will need stability and security during this time," Helen continued, fixing me with a look that expected cooperation. "She's carrying our grandchild, so her well-being is our top priority right now." Grace leaned forward, adding her voice to the carefully prepared presentation. "The thing is, Sarah, you and Ethan don't have children, so this situation is actually simpler than it might seem. There are no custody issues or shared responsibilities to complicate things. The casual dismissal of 3 years of marriage, of the life Ethan and I had built together, of the fertility struggles we had quietly endured, felt like a slap in the face." "What we're suggesting," Robert added, his voice carrying the stern authority he used when lecturing his children, "is that you make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone. Jessica needs time to establish herself as Ethan's wife and the mother of his child. Continuing this marriage of yours will only prolong everyone's pain." I looked around the room at the people who had once said they cared for me, who had welcomed me into family photos and holiday celebrations, who had praised my cooking and asked my advice on financial matters. Now they were sitting in my home, eating the cookies I had baked that morning, calmly explaining why I needed to step aside for my replacement. Jessica, who had remained silent through her future in-laws presentation, finally spoke in a voice that managed to sound both apologetic and triumphant. "I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. But Ethan and I have something special, something real and powerful that can't be denied. I'm not trying to steal your husband. I'm just following my heart and protecting my child's future." The performance was meticulously staged. The gentle tone, the lowered eyes, the protective hand resting on her growing belly. She was playing the role of the unwilling homewrecker, the woman swept up in a love too strong to resist. "We hope you'll understand," Helen added, "that the best thing for everyone is for you to agree to a peaceful divorce. That way, Jessica and the baby will have the legal protection they need, and you can move on and find happiness elsewhere." The sheer arrogance of their assumption, that I would quietly agree to dissolve my marriage and step aside to make room for my husband's pregnant mistress, was so extreme that I found myself smiling. Not the tight smile of someone trying to hide pain, but the genuine smile of someone who had just achieved absolute clarity about her situation. I rose slowly, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water from the filtered pitcher I had prepared earlier that morning. When I returned to the living room, all 6 of them were watching me expectantly, waiting for my response to their generous proposal to destroy my life for their convenience. When they finally fell silent, all eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I smiled. It was the same smile I use when reviewing contracts that appear harmless but hide non-negotiable termination clauses. "You're all right," I said slowly. "I should handle this in a mature and proper way." Helen's face relaxed instantly, her relief barely concealed. Robert let out a long breath. Grace's shoulders dropped. They believed they had won, believed that this carefully staged arrangement had worked. Ethan stood near the fireplace with Jessica, the two of them leaning toward each other with the unconscious intimacy of people who think they are being discreet. I walked straight toward them, my heels clicking evenly on the marble floor, rhythmic like a countdown clock. The envelope in my purse pressed against my hip, warming with each step. "Ethan!" "Jessica," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Since we're all trying to behave like adults, I have something for you." I pulled out the envelope and held it between us like a verdict. Ethan's face went pale before he even opened it. Maybe he sensed its weight. Truly destructive documents always weigh more than they look. "Sarah, what is this?" Jessica asked, her voice edged with a belated warning. "Open it," I said. "After all, we're handling everything so civilly." Ethan's fingers trembled as he tore the envelope open. I watched his eyes skim the first page, the filing confirmation stamp clear in the top corner. By the second page, his hands were shaking uncontrollably. The signatures, the expenses, the coldly documented proof of fraud. The sound that came from his throat wasn't quite a scream. It was more like the sound of someone watching everything he built collapse in an instant. The envelope slipped from his hand, papers scattering across the marble floor, official headings exposed for everyone to see. "Please, you don't understand," Ethan stammered, reaching toward me. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice cutting through the stunned silence of the room. "My in-laws have known about this for a long time. They didn't just stay silent, they enabled it. Every one of you just tried to convince me to accept it quietly." The papers lay scattered across my floor, and no one bent down to pick them up. Helen was the first to move, her face cycling through confusion, anger, fear, then desperate calculation. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," she said, her voice unnaturally high, addressing the room more than me. "Family matters." "Federal financial fraud is not a family matter," I cut in, bending down to pick up a page. "This is a copy of a filed complaint. On Monday morning, the investigation begins." Jessica stood frozen, her red dress looking like a warning sign. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the moment she grasped the scale of what was happening. Her phone began vibrating non-stop, probably her lawyer. I looked each of them in the eye and said, "Now I want all 6 of you out of my house immediately." The silence that followed was deep. Helen stared with her mouth open. Robert's face flushed with rage. Grace blinked repeatedly, as if she couldn't process what she'd just heard. Ethan was the first to speak. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" I'm talking about the fact that you and your family just sat in my living room and calmly explained why I should give up my husband, my marriage, and my home to make room for your pregnant mistress. But you seem to have forgotten one important thing. This house belongs to me. I gestured around the carefully furnished room, filled with love. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the walls, every renovation and upgrade, paid for with my money or my mother's. The deed is in my name. The mortgage comes out of my bank account. This is my house, and I decide who is welcome here. Helen started to speak, but I raised my hand. Ethan chose to cheat and have a child with another woman while he was still my husband. That choice makes him responsible for the consequences. The confidence on Jessica's face began to crack. If Jessica needs stability and safety, that is between her and Ethan. If she needs legal protection for her child, that is between her and Ethan. If she needs housing and financial support, that is between her and Ethan. None of those needs require my cooperation, my sacrifice, or my consent. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Ethan, you made your choice when you slept with someone else. Now you have to live with the consequences. But you don't get to live with those consequences in my house. Robert stood up, his face dark with anger. Listen here, Sarah. No, I said flatly. You see, Robert, you raised a son who thinks betraying his wife is acceptable, and then expected that wife to step aside gracefully when his affair became inconvenient. You don't get to come into my home and lecture me about what's best for everyone, when what you really want is what's most convenient for your family. Jessica, who had grown paler by the minute, suddenly spoke. I never asked anyone to give up their home. I just want my child to have a father. Your child can have a father, I replied calmly. But that father, starting now, will have to figure out how to support his new family without relying on financial backing from his ex-wife. Within days, everything collapsed at a dizzying speed. Jessica was suspended. Federal agents arrived with document boxes and hard drives. Ethan lost clients by the hour. Major contracts were canceled. One late evening, Ethan came back to pack his things. He knelt, cried, said he never meant for things to go this far. Those words might have softened me months earlier. Now they didn't. You made your choices, I said, and so did I. The divorce papers were signed not long after. Ethan permanently lost his license to practice in finance. His family sold their house, their cars, even the things that had once been symbols of status. When it was finally over, I stood in the empty house. No more lies, no more roles to perform. Only the quiet of someone who chose to stand on the side of truth and never looked back. Jessica gave birth to a baby boy 2 months after our divorce. I heard from mutual friends that Ethan had moved in with her in a small apartment on the other side of the city, and that he was struggling financially to support his new family on a single income. His construction company had let him go, and he was working longer hours for less pay than when we were married. Helen called me once, about 6 months after that confrontation in my living room. Her voice was tense, and she seemed to be choosing her words very carefully. Sarah, I want to apologize for how we handled things that day. We were only thinking about the baby and, in truth, we weren't thinking about you at all. That was a mistake. I appreciate your apology, Helen, I replied sincerely. But you don't need to apologize to me. You protected your family in the best way you knew how, and I was simply protecting myself in the best way I knew how. I'm actually doing very well, better than I expected. And that was true. The months after the divorce were a period of rediscovering myself and growing more than I had anticipated. With no emotional energy left to prop up a failing marriage, I poured myself into my career with renewed focus and was promoted to assistant branch manager. I renovated the guest bedroom into a home office, started a small investment portfolio, and even began dating again, though I approached it slowly and carefully. Most importantly, I learned something invaluable about my own strength and worth. 2 years after the divorce, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. She looked tired and worn down, juggling a crying toddler while trying to shop on a tight budget. When she saw me, her face flushed with embarrassment. I looked at this young woman who had once been so confident in her ability to replace me in Ethan's life, who had once sat in my living room glowing with the certainty that she had won something precious. Now she looked exactly like what she had been all along, a woman who got pregnant by a married man and was paying the price for it. I felt a sudden sense of pity for her, and for Ethan too. They had destroyed my marriage to be together, but they hadn't found the happiness they expected. Instead, they were trapped in a relationship built on betrayal and sustained by financial strain and parental obligation. As I walked away, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain I felt that afternoon, when Ethan confessed his affair, had seemed unbearable at the time. The humiliation of sitting in my own living room while his family explained why I should step aside for his pregnant mistress felt like the ultimate degradation. But both experiences revealed strengths I never knew I had and forced me to confront truths about my self-worth that I might never have discovered without them. The marriage I believed was solid had in fact been built on my willingness to accommodate and compromise, often at the expense of my own needs and boundaries. When I finally drew a line and refused to cross it, I realized I was far stronger than I had ever imagined. The house my mother gave me became more than just a place to live. It became a symbol of my independence and the foundation for building a life based on my own choices rather than other people's expectations. Every morning as I walk through its rooms, I remind myself that I am capable of protecting what matters to me and deserving of respect and care. The 6 people who sat in my living room that Sunday afternoon, expecting me to quietly accept their plan to rearrange my life, learned something too. They learned that even the most accommodating people have limits, and that assumptions about someone else's willingness to sacrifice can be dangerously wrong. But the moment I remember most clearly is the one when I stood up and asked them to leave. The shock on their faces when they realized the gentle, compliant daughter-in-law they thought they knew was capable of defending herself. The silence that fell after I refused to be pushed out of my own home. The sight of them hurriedly gathering their things and heading for the door. In that moment, I discovered something precious. Strength comes from knowing your worth and being willing to protect it. The woman who found her voice that afternoon is someone I have grown to respect and admire. She is someone who can smile calmly in the face of betrayal and manipulation, because she understands that other people's poor choices do not diminish her value. And perhaps most importantly, she understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to carry the responsibility of fixing someone else's mistakes. The house that witnessed the end of my marriage also became the place where I learned to stand up for myself, a lesson far more valuable than any relationship built on the expectation that I would disappear when I became inconvenient. Today, as I walk through the rooms where that confrontation took place, I don't think about betrayal, divorce, or failed family meetings. I think about the moment I found my voice and used it to protect everything my mother worked so hard to give me. And I smile, not with bitterness or regret, but with genuine gratitude for the strength I discovered I had possessed all along.